Welcome to a movement of kindness and empathy. You're listening to Compassionate Las Vegas, the podcast. Embarking on a mission to unite our city under the banner of compassion, we're one among 440 cities around the globe standing together to build a more compassionate world. Now introducing the man leading the charge, your host, Will Rucker.
Welcome to Compassionate Las Vegas, the podcast. I'm Will Rucker, and I am so excited that you continue to tune in week after week for your weekly dose of compassion. Joining us today is one of my favorite people, and she's one of your favorites as well, none other than the Congresswoman from District 3 here in Nevada, Congresswoman Susie Lee. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Will. It's so great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm so glad that you're here. Thanks for fitting us in on this fabulous Friday. I wanted to start with just the same question I kind of ask everybody, which is, how do you define compassion?
You know, most importantly, compassion to me means meeting people where they are. And I have two children, and I always would tell them, you know, no matter what, if you have a friend or someone who is acting strange or acting out in school or being mean to you, remember you don't know what's going on in their life. And I think compassion is understanding that we all are carrying some sort of burden, who knows what it is, and we're all living a life and trying to do our best, and understanding that everyone's just trying to show up and giving them the grace to be able to do that, and understanding we make mistakes and how do we help each other learn from those mistakes and move on. And honestly, it's really about building a better, whether it's building a better family, a better neighborhood, a better community, and ultimately, in the work that I do, a better nation where we can, you know, meet people, make sure they know that they're seen and they're heard, and that you have some understanding, even if you don't necessarily know exactly the ins and outs, some understanding that they may be having a struggle in their life, and being able to give them the time, you know, to be themselves.
I absolutely love that. And there are so many great nuggets in that, giving folks grace. You don't know what's going on in their life. We all have burdens. I mean, all of that's so important to remember. And I say that you do model that because I've seen you at a number of roundtables where you sit there and listen to whether it's faith community or others, and you're just listening to what's going on so that you can alleviate their suffering and make their lives better. So I want to know, in your role, can you think of a specific instance where you were like, this is the compassionate thing to do, so we're going to make this decision?
Oh, listen, I think so many times in my role, it's, obviously voting for pieces of legislation, standing up, especially because I'm a member of the Appropriations Committee. I have a lot of people who come into my office advocating to make sure that, for instance, if their child is suffering from an illness, making sure that I'm fighting to ensure that the National Institutes of Health is doing the research they need to do on what might be a life-saving treatment or drug for their child. I just sponsored a child care cancer piece of legislation. Basically figuring out, so much about the work that I do isn't always about passing a bill. It might be about writing a letter if something, someone's having a problem with the Veterans Administration or Social Security Administration, being able to pick up the phone and advocate for them, whether, they have a disability claim that hasn't been settled. There's all sorts of ways that people are calling my office asking for help and making sure that I'm showing up for them. And that's why I'm so proud of my staff that I have here in Southern Nevada. I mean, I got elected in 2019. We had the government shut down, so right away we were helping many federal employees who were without pay access services. And then, of course, the pandemic, helping people get through the pandemic. And every day helping, whether it's people with Social Security, with the IRS, et cetera. So we invest a lot in my constituent services, making sure that when people are up against a wall and they don't know where to turn, that they can always reach out to my office. And if we can't help them, we'll at least point them in the right direction, and lead them along the way to make sure they get the help that they need.
Absolutely. And I do have to commend your team because I mean, they're everywhere. Number one, any community event, you have someone there representing you. And they're always just such a delight to be around and to speak with, and professional and prompt. I mean, I could go on and on, but I'm sure you know that they're wonderful. That's why you have them, right?
Yeah, and listen, I mean, another, key piece of legislation, we had so many people call our office struggling under the prescription drug pricing. And for years and years and years, Congress has been talking about allowing a Medicare to negotiate. And really what that means for the average Joe, for the average family, is if the largest buyer of prescription drugs can negotiate a price that they are going to have the buying power. And with that buying power, they're going to be able to negotiate a lower price. And once pharmaceutical companies start offering a drug at a lower price for seniors on Medicare, in general, you're going to see that trickle down to to all families. It's not just Medicare. That was the same with insulin drugs, capping the price of insulin at $35 a month. Now, again, that was only intended to be for seniors, but we've already seen pharmaceutical companies extend that price cut to anyone who has to buy insulin. So, it's sort of like listening to what people are struggling for and then making sure you're advocating and, really working behind the scenes to get legislation over the finish line so that you can provide this type of relief for families.
Yeah, and one thing I do appreciate about you is, I mean, you have a presence, like you're definitely visible, but you're not one of the individuals that I'll say is present in drama. You do get your work done behind the scenes, and you're always above board. So you represent Nevada well, I guess is what I'm saying here.
Well, thank you. I always say when it comes to democracy that it's a team sport. And you certainly need people who I call the agitators, the people who are out there on social media pushing for, whether you're talking about LGBTQ rights or talking about, climate change and advocating for climate change legislation, voting rights, criminal justice reform, you name it. You always need those people who are elevating the awareness of our society to the injustices that are going on. And so, I always value those types of legislators who are out there doing that. I happen to be one that tries to roll up my sleeves and work behind the scenes. And as you know, I work hard in a bipartisan manner, which is obviously difficult in this polarized environment. But to me, it's really about, we're not going to get anywhere if we don't find a solution that is durable, meaning that, we might be able to find a solution that you can pass if Democrats control the House and the Senate and in the presidency. But, maybe 4 years later, 8 years later, if the tide turns, that then you're in a position where all of that great work gets wiped out. So I like to see things done in a bipartisan manner because they're more likely to survive, I guess, and that's really what I was most proud of in this last last Congress when we passed the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the bipartisan Chips and Science Act to bring manufacturing back to America. We even passed bipartisan gun safety legislation, which was the first time in several decades something had been done like that. So, I pride myself in being the one who's negotiating, trying to find, everyone always talks about their red line. I like to talk about where are the areas that we agree on, and then let's work from that point out and try to get to a solution. Because if you each start talking about your red line, then you're going to stand behind your red line and you're not going to get anything done. And so to me, that's really important about the type of work that I do in Washington.
Yeah, and I think that that's exactly the heart of compassion is finding those areas of commonality because at the end of the day, we are far more alike than we are different, and we really do all want to make this place better and better for all of us. So you spend a lot of time, most of your time, working for others, taking care of others, making decisions that influence others. What are you doing to take care of yourself? Self-compassion is one of the things
That's
I
true.
believe in. So what are you doing to make sure you're all right?
Well, I'm very committed to exercise and getting outside. So at least once a day, I'm doing something outdoors, either here or in Washington. I think being out in nature is very, very healing, and it's taking time for me to think and just sort of, get off my phone and get outside. I meditate as well. I think taking some time just to shut your brain down, and try to get rid of the echoes and, get rid of the chatter in your brain and just really focus on, getting centered is important as well. So, and I have two kids, my daughter, Nevada, my son, Cody. So, they're both not living in Las Vegas. They're in school now. So, taking time when I can to be with them. And I always say it's about quality over quantity because when your kids grow up, you get less and less quantity. So you better take the quality when you can get it and enjoy those pockets of time that you have to spend with them.
For sure. And I too love the outdoors. I'm not too far from Mount Charleston, and I also go down to Red Rock when I get the occasion. So I love to do those trails and just be in nature, which for me is unique because I'm from Michigan where we have no mountains. So it's
Well, I'm
really a
from
special
Ohio
thing.
too, so
Okay.
same as you. So maybe that's why I love it so much because it's so different.
Yeah, definitely. But I do wonder, my work is nowhere near as impactful as yours because you're influencing the nation, and I just got a few folks I have to take care of. How do you disconnect from the job to truly be present when you are with your kids or when you are engaging in self-compassion?
Yeah, that is a very difficult task for sure because you're no matter, like, even when I'm out with friends, the conversation invariably ends back towards politics. It's so it's on top of people's minds. And so my kids and I spend a lot of time skiing. We like to ski, we like to hike and mountain bike. When you're doing sports like that, you really have to focus on what you're doing. You can't really be thinking about things in the back of your mind. You got to be present and focusing on what's in front of you. And I will say it's difficult, even taking time to read a book. Sometimes I'll be reading a book and I'll catch myself thinking about, 15 things I need to be doing. I always say this job is the ultimate FOMO job, fear of missing out. Like, there's always, wherever you are, there's always four other places you could potentially be. And so you're always analyzing, like, am I in, in the right place? And for me, it's when you get there, you're with the people you're with and be present for them, and be with them. And, I will say it's one of the most fascinating parts of this job is the exposure I've had to so many incredible people and incredible communities. I've learned so much about, even like I said, I started off this segment talking about families who are suffering illnesses. I mean, I've learned so much about rare diseases that were rare, I never really knew about, or just learning about different communities here in Southern Nevada. To me, we are such a rich, diverse community. And it is, in my opinion, our strength in Southern Nevada. And so being able to represent such a diverse community has been really incredible for me, such a life changing and educational experience. It's been incredible.
Yeah, I can only imagine how many different things come across your desk. I'm a lifelong avid learner, and my attention span is probably that of a gnat because I'm like, oh, I want to see this, I want to see that, I want to do this. So I know with everyone coming to your office, you get to learn a lot. I want to switch focus for just a moment here. We are celebrating Pride, LGBTQIA plus Pride here in Southern Nevada this weekend. So I want to know a couple things. One is there anyone in the LGBT community that has particularly inspired you? And two, why have you been such a strong ally, or what led you down that path to be such a great advocate for LGBT rights?
Well, I have obviously so many personal friends and family members who inspire me every day. I would say in Congress, former Congressman David Cicilline, who was the chair of the Congressional Equality Caucus or co chair, the author of the Equality Act, and a good friend of mine. He's no longer in Congress, he is now in Rhode Island, but he has definitely been a friend and an inspiration. And to me, LGBTQ plus rights are about basic civil rights and about basic equality and basic justice. And I believe that you should be able to love who you want to love, that you should be able to live a full and complete life, and it should not be dependent on your gender identity or your sexual identity. And so to me, it's a basics rights issue. And I think that we've seen so much progress, and then it feels like sometimes you're two steps forward and sometimes one step back, sometimes two steps back. I mean, we've certainly seen some Supreme Court decisions that came down this year that were incredibly distressing. And so for me, it's just you always have to be on your toes and always have to be pushing forward, and just like reproductive choice. I always, that is a major issue I've been a leader on. And again, it's basic rights that I believe that each human should have the potential and the ability, has the potential, but should have the ability to live a full, complete, and dignified life. And that government should not be getting in the way of that.
Yeah. I would love to dive in a little more deeply, but we're coming up on the end of our time together. We just got a few minutes. So I want to ask, the LGBT issue is often polarizing. And if you're looking at religious communities, sometimes it's polarizing there, or more conservative areas. How do you navigate situations when policy and compassion might even seem to be at odds?
Well, I think most important, you got to give people a chance to make their views known, right? And I feel so much about what's happened really since, honestly, social media is that people have found it so easy to get behind a screen and to tweet out or, text out some vitriol and remain anonymous and drop their phone and walk away. And to me, that's not constructive. I think sitting down and having the conversations of, why do you feel the way you do? Have you ever thought about it this way? And I think having those conversations, one, are important for me, and two, important for people on the other side of the issue. And to me, I think that's the most important thing I can do when it comes to debating and understanding some of these issues that are and honestly, I will say, especially when it comes to LGBTQ plus issues, and you've seen all of the, attacks on trans children and trans sports, and again, I think some people view this as a fear tactic. And I like to bring it back to, why do you feel this way? And then let's get to the facts, right? Of how this happens, what actually exists. And so I think just having those tough conversations is really the way I most effectively deal with these divisive issues.
Yeah, confronting it head on, sticking with facts, and acknowledging that people's feelings are legitimate and valid. I think all of those are great tools. Before we get to my last question, I do want to know, particularly for young people, what message of hope can you convey? Because I can tell you that the young people I speak with right now are very concerned for their future. They're concerned for the state of our democracy, really. So is there a message of hope that you can convey to them?
Oh, yes. I mean, I am hopeful for the future because of young people. And I feel that young people today, at least that I've talked to, are more plugged in and engaged in what's happening and the power of their voices. And so I always say this world will only improve when you get involved and advocate and show up to vote and show up to run in elections. I'm thinking about just, when you think about the legislation we passed on gun safety, again, it wasn't the be all end all, but it was a piece of bipartisan gun safety legislation. And a lot of that came through the children, through the young people from Florida, from the Stonewall Douglas High School, who, you have Maxwell Frost, who is now a member of Congress, who helped create an Office of Gun Safety in the White House, which had never been done before. Those types of, again, they are steps. They're not, wiping out all the problems, but they're making progress. And so I feel very hopeful that when young people show up and get involved and understand how important their voice is as a voting bloc, as an advocacy bloc, that we're going to see a change, not just across this country, but across this world. And, when you think about climate change, that is, again, I have two, my son's 19, my daughter's 23. That is top of mind for young people. We just passed the most significant investment in climate change in history. And so that advocacy does have an impact. And so I always say, don't underestimate the power of your voice, but you got to show up, you got to vote, you got to make sure your friends vote, you got to remain educated, and you got to just keep pushing forward. And I know sometimes it's frustrating how things move so slowly, but you never know when the environment's going to be ripe for you to make that breakthrough. And that's why it's important to keep working on the issues that you're passionate about, because, there's things that are outside of our control. Like I think about, the gun safety the Safer Communities Act that we passed. This was at a time when the Roe v. Wade, the Dobbs decision came down and Roe v. Wade was overturned. And several days, I don't know if it was after or before, you had the Uvalde horrific gun, the shooting at that school down in Uvalde, Texas. And so at that moment, many of my colleagues, Republicans, who would not have moved any piece of legislation on gun safety were like, okay, we got to do something because we're on the wrong side of both of these issues when it comes to the American public. And that's when the environment was right for us to be able to pull together that gun safety legislation. Unfortunately, it took such a horrific act, and we're still not out of the woods in terms of the gun epidemic, gun violence epidemic in this country. So I just say keep moving forward and keep advocating, because you are the future and your voice will be the most powerful voting bloc out there, and use it.
Awesome. I think that's a great place to leave it. I so appreciate you joining Compassionate Las Vegas, the podcast. Before I let you go, I've got to ask this. What's the one song you're listening to right now that keeps you moving, keeps you motivated?
Oh my God. Motivate. I don't know. You're going to crack up. I have been listening to Olivia Rodrigo.
Okay. All right.
Love her. Yeah. But I don't know if I'd say it's motivating, but yeah, but I'm going to see Pink tomorrow night. So I'm looking forward to that. And yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you again for joining the podcast. This has been Compassionate Las Vegas, the podcast. I'm your host, Will Rucker. And as I always remind you, you are not just a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop. And what you do matters. So live compassionately. We'll see you next time.